Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second day of this 178th EAAE seminar on the future challenges and resilience of farming system in Europe. My name is Jan de Meij. I'm an assistant professor in business economics at the University of Wageningen, and I will be the chair of this session for the next hour. We're quite lucky because this is the first session of the day, so I think everybody is still fresh in their minds. We all have a cup of coffee with us, so that's perfect setting to have a nice scientific discussion. We are also quite relaxed on time because we only have 2 presentations rather than 3, so we're not pressed in the end to make sure everybody gets to say what they want or ask their questions. So that's very lovely to start the day, I would say. This session, even though the seminar is called Future Challenges of Farming Systems, is actually called Current Challenges. So, of course, to talk about the future, we need to characterize and understand the current challenges faced by farming systems as well, of course. And we have 2 interesting cases to talk about today. So first, I will pass the word to Francesco. We will talk about challenges in French and Italian systems. And then secondly, we have a speaker, Barbara Heinrich, who will talk about German cases as well. The setup is that we have about 15 minutes per presentation, and then we have minimum 5 minutes of question time for everyone. May I ask you to post all of your questions down below in the chat, and I will then read them out to the speakers so we can have an uninterrupted Q&A session after the presentations. So with that being said, I would like to pass the word now to Francesco. You have about 15 minutes. I'll let you know if your time is up. The floor is yours to present your first work.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me and see my screen? Okay, perfect. So I will begin with my presentation. Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm Francesco Accatino from EAAE, a researcher, and I present this work in collaboration with IDEL, which is the Livestock Institute in France, and colleagues from the University of Padova. So I will speak about the French-Italian beef production chain, the challenges, the risk management strategies related to this production chain. Well, I will start by telling the story of how this work was conceived. And so everything started in the Shore Farm project, and the Bourbonnais region is actually the French case study of the Shore Farm project. So between 2018 and 2021, we did a number of activities with stakeholders in order to assess the resilience of this landscape, of this region. So the region you can see in the picture is characterized by natural grasslands and edges, a very nice landscape, I would say. And it's very specialized in grassland-based beef production. So actually, this is the breed of cow you can see there is the Charolais cow, and the region is specialized in raising young cattle that mostly serves 2 different markets. So there is an internal French market where the female cattle are the heifers are placed, and the male cattle are...
Francesco, I'm very sorry to interrupt you here, but there appears to be a technical problem with your slides. We see your PowerPoint interface and not the slides that are moving on. So you need to change where you move your presentation. It needs to be in the StreamYard and not somewhere else. So I think maybe it's moving in the wrong location. Okay, now I see you moving your slides. Maybe press F5 to see if that helps.
You see that?
I see you reshaping your screen, yes?
Okay, and you see
The slides
the
weren't
slides,
advancing before.
and now they advance, right?
No, they don't. That's the problem.
So maybe I will share the screen. Maybe I will change modality of a screen sharing. I will.
Yeah.
Okay.
No worries. We have a lot of time for technical errors like this, so it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now you see the screen, right?
Let's see. It's loading. Now we see an infinite loop.
Okay. Now you should see the presentation.
Yeah. And if you now do full screen, let's see what happens.
Okay. And you see the slides moving?
Yeah. Perfect.
Great. So
if this works for you.
Perfect. Okay. So I start from where I finished.
Yeah.
So I told
see
you
the lovely picture of the cow.
Exactly. So I told you to look at the picture, but you couldn't see that. So this is the Charolais breed that you can see in the region. And what's the point? The point is that this region serves two markets: an internal French market, mainly for female cattle, and the male cattle are exported to mostly to the Po Valley in Italy. So this is we thought that actually studying only the Bourbonnais region in the shore farm project was only half of the story, and we actually decided to study the coupled system. So, and this is where the collaboration between the three institutions came. So we have two complementary farming systems. From on the one hand, in the Massif Central in France, we have grassland-based a grassland-based system, and in the northeast of Italy, it's a fattening specialized feedlot system. So this production chain was consolidated more and more from the 60s, mainly due to the increasing demand of beef from Italian consumers and from the increasing specialization in maize cultivation in the northeast of Italy. So why it is important to study the two systems in a coupled way? So first of all, because we are speaking about big volumes of beef production. So France and Italy are the first and the third beef meat producers in Europe. Second, there is a mutual dependency between those two farming systems, which poses a lot of questions about resilience. So the more than 60% of the weanlings slaughtered in Italy come from abroad, and of this, 80% come from France. So Italy imports from many countries, but the most comes from France. And this is mainly due to the cost effectiveness of the transport, because the distance is short and is compatible with animal welfare norms. This coupling of territories is quite unique in Europe, in which the life cycle of livestock is divided into two different farming systems. And it's also important to study the functions provided and the challenges faced by those two systems together. So the aim of the study was to study the resilience, mostly the resilience perceived by the farmers in the two farming systems. So the study we did was comparative, but at the end we could get insights about the whole production chain. So resilience is defined as the capacity of farming systems to provide functions in face of challenges. So we actually use the framework developed in Shore Farm, which is not only about a metric of resilience, but it's a complete overview about the functions provided by the system, the challenges. We also include the risk management strategies in the two systems, and the resilience capacities, which are robustness, adaptability, and transformability. Okay, what we did was to send out a questionnaire that was designed in the Shore Farm project. So during the Shore Farm project, we sent out the questionnaire in the Bourbonnais region for 50 farms in November 2018. More recently, we sent out the same questionnaire in Italy, in the provinces of Padova, Verona, and Vicenza, 25 farms. And yes, there is the COVID crisis in the middle between the two questionnaires, but this should not affect too much the results. But let's see. So let's see the questions and the answers to the questionnaire. So about the functions, the respondents were invited to divide 100 points into a set of 8 predefined functions. So not only food production, but also functions related to economic viability, quality of life, natural resources, biodiversity, and animal welfare. And let's see the answers. So the green one is for the Bourbonnais, and the yellow one is for the northeast of Italy. And we see that the answers were similar and relatively high for and animal welfare. Then we see difference in the importance assigned to food production. So the Italian system is more concerned about this function, and the French system compensates, assigning more importance to the natural resources, biodiversity and habitat, and the attractiveness of the area. So this mostly correspond to the type of farming system, where in France is extensive, and there is more concern and awareness about the linkage to natural resources. And then we have other bio-based resources and quality of life, where the importance is lower for the two systems. The challenges. So in the questionnaire, the farmers were asked to mention a maximum of 3 challenges expected, the most important 3 challenges expected in the next 20 years. So what we did was to organize in virtual post-its the challenges mentioned, and we actually classified into environmental, social, economic, and institutional. And then we also defined subcategories a posteriori starting from the answers given. So this is the percentages divided into the 4 categories. So we can see that in the Bourbonnais region, there is more concern about environmental, social, and economic challenges. And in the northeast of Italy, there is more concern about economic and institutional challenges. So very briefly, within environmental challenges, there is, in the Bourbonnais, very high concern about climate change, mostly droughts. So this is a big difference with Italy, where more concern is for other types of challenges. So also other challenges mentioned were related to the lack of food security, mostly for France. For Italy, it was more about the need to reduce the environmental impact and the disease. Social challenges. So we have the Bourbonnais was more concerned mostly about the continuity and the need to find successor for the farming system, the societal expectation, which can be very high in relation to livestock, and the preference changes of the consumer. But in Italy, it's more like about the lack of skilled labor. Economic challenges, the mostly mentioned was the lack of profitability. You see very high percentages, and northeast of Italy were much more concerned about market fluctuation than the French system. Institutional challenges, and here it's more about the Italian system, the complicated red tape and regulations, including the regulations related to animal welfare. For the Bourbonnais system, it was more about the lack of subsidies in the new CAP. Risk management strategies. So we proposed a set of different management strategies, and they had to, and the farmers were invited to indicate if they apply that in the last 5 years. So I will show you only an example, only some examples. So the two systems were highly concerned about implementing measures to implement disease. And then we have differences. So the strategies of the extensive French system were mostly related to maintaining financial savings for hard times and to diversification. In the Italian system, things were more related to technology. So technology to control environmental risk, and also using market information to plan activities. For the resilience capacities, we submitted to the respondents a set of questions related to robustness, adaptability, and transformability. And farmers, they had to indicate on a scale from 1 to 7 how much they agreed those. So for robustness, the affirmation, one of the affirmation was after something happened, something challenges has happened in the farm, it's easy to bounce back to the current profitability. Another affirmation for adaptability. So if needed, my farm can adapt activities, varieties, technologies in response to challenges. And transformability, if needed, I can easily make major changes that would transform my farm. And actually, the answers were univocal. And the Bourbonnais, the perceived resilience capacity in France were always higher than in the Italian system. So to conclude, a set of take-home messages. So many differences that we observed were about the difference between extensive and intensive system. So from one side, we have a system which is linked to natural resources. On the other side, a system which more focused in production and with more constraints, with less flexibility. On the other side, in France, we have a system which is highly exposed to climate change. In Italy, a system which is more exposed to regulation and bureaucracy. In the Massif Central, animal welfare is intrinsic already in the practices because animals are raised on pasture. But in the northeast of Italy, animal welfare is mostly a need that needs to be guaranteed and expose the farmer to more concerns and costs. Then we have the strategies in the Massif Central, which are more oriented to accumulating reserves. In Italy, they are more related to new technologies. Highly possibility of diversification in France, maybe mostly due to the availability of land, and low possibility in the Italian system, and a system which is perceived more resilient by the farmers and less in France and less in the northeast of Italy. So then we observe some differences in the social challenges. This is not can be related to the extensive versus intensive, but actually we need to find the reasons in the social context of the two. So the consumer behavior the consumer perception. So this needs further investigation. Then we have a problem, which is the low profitability, which is experienced in the two systems, but actually it can be due to different causes. So the price of the weanlings are too low for French farmers and too high for the Italian farmers. We also need to note that many French farmers produce under label, so they have more costs. In the Italian system, they cannot maintain the same environmental standard. So there is a problem in the whole production chain related to the prices, which need to be addressed at the level of the whole production chain. The challenge in a system can affect the other system. So actually the droughts in the French part of the chain are not perceived in Italy, but this is a type of challenge that can reduce the herd and increase the cost for the Italian part. So it's important to build awareness about the issues in the two systems in the other system. And then to conclude, a good perspective would be an integrated approach of the two systems together, because so far it's only comparative, but it's important to address the two challenges together. So thank you very much for your attention. So you see the contacts of myself and of Giorgio Marchesini, which is the colleague cooperated for this study, and you can contact him for the for the Italian part of the study. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesco. Because we cannot take real applause from the floor, let me give it to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you also for sticking well to the time schedule. You almost hit perfectly the 50 minutes mark. We got, in the meantime, one question from the floor. May I remind everyone that at the bottom there is a chat box where you can ask all of your questions, and I will read them out now to Francesco. So the first one came from our project partner, Patrick, and she actually asks if in the extensive beef system in the Massif Central, if it is dependent on an intensive system in northeast Italy, can it then be argued that the system is extensive? Shouldn't it actually be considered as one whole system, as you mentioned in the end?
I'm not sure if I understood the question. Well, it's important to consider the two systems together, and the two systems have different needs. So in extensive system in France and intensive system in Italy, of course, I'm not sure if to interpret correctly the question, but the problems of the extensive systems can also apply because they can have consequences of the other system, which is completely different, but indirectly it is subject to droughts and to the problems of the extensive systems. So in a way, if we consider the whole system, we have to consider extensive and intensive systems together.
Okay, so I guess the core of the question is, are they one system? So should they be analyzed jointly, or can you actually claim that one is extensive and the other is intensive? Can you look at them in isolation? Is that allowed, essentially?
I think we can look in isolation, but the two systems are very dependent because there is this commercial mutual dependency of the two systems. So if the French system stops exporting weanlings, there can be consequences on the other systems. So this is an issue for resilience.
Yeah. Well, in another dimension, we're not just talking about resilience here, also about sustainability, I imagine. So a follow-up question is there, because the systems are rather far apart, is there also an implication for animal welfare due to the fact that animals need to be transported from one region to the other region? Is that being considered or mentioned?
Yes, during transports, there are some animal welfare norms that have to be respected. So, for example, if the distance is too long, for example, from Romania, from Poland, it's important to stop different times along the way to offload the livestock from the camion. So this is a cost of time and money. But for the French system, for the French-Italian transport, the distance is short. So this makes things more cost-effective and increases the mutual dependency of the two systems. So they are distant, but among all the options, they are not so distant because
Okay.
yeah.
And then from an animal perspective, from an animal welfare perspective, what would you say there? That if you follow these rules, things are fine, or?
Well, this has to be investigated. I don't think I have the question, the answer right now. But this is an important issue that needs further investigation.
Yeah. Then on a related note, another question is whether there are options, alternative options for selling French beef.
Well, as far as I know, the French also to other countries. Exports to Spain, to North Africa. They also exported to Turkey. But it's a mutual dependency in the two ways. So actually, it's the most of the cattle is exported to Italy. So also during the COVID crisis, one of the concern was how do we do with all these weanlings that we cannot export to Italy? Then luckily, the export could go even during the COVID. But the most concern was how to deal with the male production chain. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm quickly looking at the floor if there are final questions. Let's wait a couple of seconds. Okay, I guess not. So, Francesco, thanks again for your nice presentation on this comparison between two systems. That's very interesting. We now move on to the second presentation, which will be by Barbara Heinrich, looking at a German case study. For those of you joining right now, you are in the session on the current challenges of farming systems in Europe. So we have to talk about the current challenges as well in order to understand the resilience, the future resilience, and the future challenges of farming systems, of course. So Barbara, if you are there, I would love to give you the floor right now. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, thank you very much, Jan. I'm very happy to be here and present our work. It's joint work together with Hildegard Garming and Hanna Wildenhus, and the title of my presentation is The Perception of External Challenges. How do German organic vegetable farmers deal with climate change, new fertilizer regulation, and Corona? Yes, agriculture has to deal with risk and uncertainty, and currently we are observing continuously increasing changes in fundamental production conditions, and we identified three recent challenges of current importance, namely the Corona pandemic, modified fertilizer regulation in Germany, and climate change and changing weather conditions. And we choose organic vegetable production as an example. Why did we choose vegetable production? Because it has a high intensity of labor use, and it is especially fertilization is especially important for vegetable production because vegetables are highly susceptible to nutrient deficiency. It has effects on yield and on quality, and we often observe high residual nitrogen after harvest. And vegetable production is also particularly affected by extreme weather conditions. Yes, that's why we chose organic vegetable production. The aim of our study is to analyze how organic vegetable farmers perceive different types of external challenges and how they deal with them, taking the corona pandemic, the modified fertilizer ordinance, and changing weather conditions and climate change as examples. We were guided by the following research questions. How do farm managers perceive these challenges? How do they see themselves affected? And what coping strategies do they use to deal with the challenges? The structure of my presentation is quite classical. I briefly glance into our theoretical approach and then going to present our empirical work. And yes, in the discussion, I will connect the theory with the empirics. Yes, in order to structure the analysis of the external challenges, we derived a characterization scheme of the challenges and identified 5 attributes we considered important. It's the principal origin of the challenge, the potential level of damage of the challenge, the probability of occurrence, the predictability of occurrence, and the time needed for adaptation. And in our paper, we hypothesized how these 3 challenges might be or might fit into this scheme, but I skipped this for time reasons now and go to the empirical work we did. Yes, we chose a qualitative approach to cover as many aspects of the research questions as possible. We used interview data of 16 farmers from organic vegetable farms. The interviews were audio recorded and transcribed, and yes, the respondents were selected via regional advisors and other experts. The data collection took place in autumn 2020 and January and February of this year, and were mostly done by video conference or telephone. Yes, the respondents' answers on direct questions were analyzed qualitatively. We chose as a study region 3 federal states in Germany with about 300 organic vegetable farms in this area. The farms are quite diverse in some respects, so the farm sizes vary quite extensively. Also, we find all types of marketing channels common for organic vegetable farms, and also the production structure on the farms is quite diverse. And yes, our sample is reflecting this diversity quite well. So we have farms we ask farms between 2 and 240 hectare of vegetable area. We have all types of marketing channels, and between 4 crops on field scale up to more than 40 vegetable crop types per farm. Yes, even on quite small farms. Now I come to the results. With respect to the corona pandemic, we asked 2 direct questions. The first was if the farms were, but how the farms were affected by the pandemic in the last year, and how they adapted or plan to adapt for the coming growing season of this year. And the farms reported negative effects with respect to labor. This was especially due to increased cost for labor organization and other labor-related things. And most of the farms already adapted the organization of labor and other routines like hygiene routines, and also some farms invested in additional sanitary facilities. Other negative effects reported were increased cost for marketing and adaptation of farmer shops, and one farm reported that there were delays in supply of inputs and plantlets. Beside the negative effects, there were also quite extensive positive effects. Some farms were able to attract local workforce, and many farms reported that there were significantly higher demand for their organic vegetables, and also often higher output prices. With respect to these positive effects, some farms want to increase their production in the actual growing season. With respect to the second challenge, the changes in German fertilizer regulation, we asked 3 questions. The first question was if and how the farms were affected by the changes that occurred in 2017. 5 farms reported that the changes in regulation had no effects on the farm, and some reported some minor changes like changes in the period for manure spreading. And yes, quite many farms said that they now have to calculate fertilizer demand according to a certain scheme and take and mean samples. So that's new for them. And in general, many farms said that now we know how much fertilizer we could apply if we would want to. So this was a regular statement as an answer to our question. With the second question was respect to the restrictions in nitrate-sensitive areas. This came into force in the last year. There are quite more tight restrictions with in comparison to the normal regulation, and some farms reported that parts of their farm area is located in or are located in the nitrate sensitive areas, and that they are minor changes they have to do, but it's not that important for them. The third question was if farms expect effects of the future regulations of the changes that came into force in 2020. In Germany, it's needed that the federal states need to implement at least part of the federal regulations. So not all details of the regulations are clear yet, and that's why we ask for expected effects of these regulation changes in last year. And yes, some farms do not expect any changes for their farm, and some farms report that they expect problems with the application of manure, compost, and mulch, which are common fertilizer types of in organic farming. And some farms also express that they are uncertain about details of the regulations and which details would apply on which regulation would apply on the farm and if it would apply at all. With respect to changing weather and climate change, we asked 4 questions. The first question, well, the first 2 questions were if the farmers observed changes in the weather during the last few years, and whether they observed changes in climate during the last decades. The third question was if they saw if the observed changes have any effects on the vegetable production, and if the first question was if they want to or plan to adapt to these changes. So many farms reported that there were 3 years of unusual dry weather, and also some report that the frequency of extreme events with respect to water increased. This had effects on the vegetable production. Some farms reported that there are increased costs for irrigation, but there are also positive effects of this lack of water. So the control of the growing conditions is easier, and also mechanical weed control is easier when it's dry. Many farms want to adapt to these weather changes. They want to invest in irrigation or in better irrigation techniques, and also quite a number of farms reported that they want to improve their soil water retention capacity. They also reported that the vegetation period changed. It became longer, and the autumns are warmer, and generally there are shifts in the seasons. And this has also positive effects on vegetable production. So now more sets are possible, especially in the late autumn, and also new crops are possible now. And yes, some farms want to adjust to these new conditions and adjust their crop portfolio and cultivation planning. With respect to extreme weather events, there were reported periods of extreme heat, strong winds, and lack of frost in winter. And this has mainly negative effects due to quality defects, and farms want to adapt in different forms. Now, in the discussion, I want to connect our results on the challenges with the attributes of the characterization scheme. With respect to Corona, the pandemic was perceived as given, and the origin of the challenges arising from Corona were mostly societal or political. So there were higher demand and increased costs due to political restrictions. The origin of the fertilizer regulation the challenge fertilizer regulation were mainly due to political decisions, and the origin of the challenge climate change was due to natural events. With the potential level of damage was assessed is with respect to Corona mostly low, and no of the farm had experienced the Corona case on their farm, so there were not that much damage, but they also reported positive effects due to the very good market situation. With respect to fertilizer, the potential level of damage is also assessed to be mostly low, since no changes in production system are needed. With respect to climate change, the potential level of damage is assessed to be very high, which is mainly due to water and high temperatures. And there are damages in yield and in quality expected because it affects the marketability of the produce. With respect to the attributes probability and predictability of occurrence, yes, Corona was clearly unexpected and sudden. It was like a shock, but now possible actions are quite foreseeable. With respect to fertilizer regulations, the probability and predictability of occurrence were quite high, but there's still a quite high uncertainty whether or not if the own farm will be affected by a specific regulation or not, and this especially applies for small farms. With respect to climate change, the probability of occurrence was assessed to be quite high. This can be seen at the willingness of the farms to invest in better irrigation, to adapt by growing new crops, and by the willingness to work more on improving soil fertility and water retention capacity. With respect to the predictability of occurrence, the farmers assessed it for water shortage and high temperatures quite high, but for other specific effects for on certain sites and at a certain time are quite low. And the time needed for adaptation with the corona pandemic, it was often immediately, but now preparations are done for the coming growing season. With respect to fertilizer regulation, the time needed for adaptation is also short-term, and adaptation is hindered because of the uncertainty if a farm is affected or not. And with respect to climate change, the time needed for adaptation is short to medium run, and this can be seen that the farms want to adapt soon and not in the future. To conclude, we think that the characterization scheme we developed was helpful to analyze the three challenges. And with respect to our to the aim of our research, Corona was perceived that it had no much damage effect on the farms. It lead to a higher demand, and some preparations are done for the future. The fertilizer regulation were perceived as not that much effect. Had not that much effect on the farms. They were only affected via documentation and sample requirements, and also there are no major changes in production system needed. With respect to climate change, this is perceived as a major threat for vegetable production, but it also has positive effects, and the farmers deal with this challenge by investing in better irrigation techniques and increased soil fertility. To connect this results with the topic of the seminar with resilience of farming systems, we think that the farmers gave a quite detailed and differentiated picture of the challenges and how they perceive and deal with them. They did not only report negative impacts of the challenges, but also highlight opportunities. And in general, the organic production system was perceived as an asset to deal with the threats. So just from my point of view, I think that the farms were quite robust. In the short run, they are able to adapt to changing production conditions. And I think with respect to transformability, I think the transformation of the system with respect to the three challenges we analyzed, it is not necessary at the moment. Okay, with this I want to conclude. Thank you very, very much for your attention, and yes, I hope to come into a discussion, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara, again, for a very clear and nice presentation. Let me also give you a round of applause by myself.
Thank you.
So, looking at the chat, there are no questions yet, but we still have lots of times for questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat and I will read them out here. But let me start by kicking off with the first question. I really love your last point where you say that organic production was perceived as an asset to deal with threats. So that actually hints at a resilient component, a positive resilient component of organic production systems. I know it's not part of your study, but could you maybe comment on comparing then organic systems, vegetable systems with conventional systems? Do you have some indications that it is indeed resilience enhancing to be in an organic production system? Or not?
Yes, I don't have too much insights in conventional production of vegetables, but as far as I know, there is much more pressure on the conventional system with respect to fertilizer, for example. So the fertilizer regulation changes in Germany is affecting the conventional production system quite severe. So with respect to this challenge, it's more challenging for them, I would say. But because it's a quantitative analysis we have done, it's not so easy to to say that it's that we can speak for the whole system. So we have indications that it could be in resilience enhancing to produce organic, but I would be I don't know.
Okay. It's not part of the study, so indeed it would be just your personal view on that. Good. In all fairness,
it would be the same with the seasonal workers. So I think that the conventional system is much more dependent on seasonal workers, and so there were more challenging situations for them. I can propose, but I don't know it.
Okay. In all fairness, the minute I posed my question, I saw that Pietrek Reitsma asked exactly the same question also in the chat. So great minds think alike, apparently. A second question we get from the floor is from Alboyu Cornelia, who's asking whether adaptation to climate change is higher for organic vegetables grown in open fields or under glass.
Under glass with protected production, it's a quite different thing because you can control the growing conditions much more. So you have to irrigate in any case if it's dry or not outside, and yes, you need to regulate the temperatures. But for many crops, they are not grown outside and under glass. So I think and under glass production is much more costly and much more intensive also in an organic system, because it's the productivity must be much higher due to the higher costs. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I say. So I think the protected production under glass is not that much affected by climate change than the open field production systems.
Yeah. Okay, another question from my side. I really like that you say that there are both negative impacts but also opportunities, and that's always good to see that people have that in mind. I was wondering, looking at your respondents, are there different groups or classes of people? So were there very negative people who only mentioned mostly challenges, or those who mostly presented a positive picture, or was it a mixed story for most people? So I'm just wondering, at the individual level, did all of them present both sides or not?
As far as I remember, most of the people mentioned both aspects. Yes, and I think this is also part of their resilience, that they were able to see both. So we were only asking how they were affected, and they did not report only the negative effects, but also almost always also the positive effects. Yes.
Okay, that's nice to hear.
Maybe this has to do with selection bias or so. No? We don't know how the selection of respondents influence these types of answers.
Okay, with that, I don't see any other questions popping up. So I'd like to thank you again for your nice presentation and your answers. And with 3 minutes on the clock, I think we did perfect in this session to fill up the time. So we now end this session. I thank you all for attending, and I will see you all in one of the later sessions today. Thank you.